Look at the bee on your flowers for 5 seconds. She looks gentle, she looks busy. She looks like she belongs to a world of nectar, sunlight, and small, peaceful work. But inside a hive near your garden, another kind of work may be happening in the dark. A sealed honeycomb cell can look like the safest place in the colony. It is closed, it is protected. It holds a young bee that has not yet stepped into the world outside your window. But if something goes wrong inside that cell, worker bees may tear it open and remove what is growing there. This is the hidden war inside the hive, and most people get it wrong. They think a bee colony protects every young bee at all costs. It does not. Sometimes the only way to save the colony is to sacrifice one cell before the danger spreads. By the end of this, you will know what bees are really doing when they inspect sealed brood, why a healthy hive may sometimes destroy part of its own future, and why the final sign changes the way you see the bee that lands on your garden flowers tomorrow morning. Number 1. The safest place in the hive can become the most dangerous. From the outside, a sealed honeycomb cell looks finished. The young bee inside has been fed. The workers have closed the wax cap over her. The cell sits among thousands of others, arranged in that clean pattern people love to photograph. To a human eye, it looks organized, quiet, almost perfect. But the hive is not looking at the cell the way you look at it. The hive is reading it. Inside that sealed space, a young bee is developing. She cannot fly away. She cannot clean herself. She cannot call out to the workers outside and explain that something is wrong. She is hidden behind wax, and that is exactly why the colony has to pay attention. Because a sealed cell can protect a young bee. It can also hide a problem. A disease, a parasite, a dead larva, a smell that does not belong, a tiny change that most creatures would miss completely. The workers walking across the comb are not just moving randomly over wax, they are inspecting. They touch the surface, they smell, they pause, they compare one cell to another, and when one cell is wrong, the colony may respond in a way that feels brutal if you think like a human. They open it, they remove what is inside, and they do it not because the colony is careless, but because the colony is trying to stay alive. Sign number 2. Bees can smell trouble before you would ever see it. This behavior is called hygienic behavior. The term sounds clean and simple, but what it describes can be one of the most ruthless survival systems in the bee world. Hygienic worker bees can detect brood that is diseased, dead, damaged, or parasitized, even when the problem is hidden under a wax cap. In plain English, the hive has workers that act like living inspectors. They do not need to understand disease the way a scientist does. They do not need to know the name of a virus or the life cycle of a mite. They only need to notice that something behind that wax cap is not right. Maybe the smell changes. Maybe the cell feels different. Maybe a chemical trace leaks through the cap in a way other bees ignore, but these workers notice. And here's the part that matters for your garden. The bee on your lavender may have come from a colony where this decision already happened today. While you were making coffee, while the screen door closed behind you, while the flowers outside looked peaceful, workers inside the hive may have been deciding which sealed cells could stay and which ones had to be removed. You would never know by looking at the forager on your flowers. She carries no sign of that decision. But the colony behind her may be alive because some workers did not look away from one bad cell. Behavior number 3. The hive does not save every young bee equally. This is the hardest reversal. Most people imagine a hive as a place of total protection, every larva fed, every cell guarded, every young bee treated as precious. And young bees are precious. But a colony is not a family in the human sense. It is a living system. And living systems sometimes make decisions that feel cold because the alternative is worse. If one infected or parasitized cell is left alone, the problem can grow. A pathogen can spread, a parasite can reproduce, a damaged young bee can become part of a larger weakness. What looks like mercy in one cell can become danger for thousands of others. So worker bees do something that looks cruel from the outside. They uncap the cell. They pull out the brood. They carry it away. The cell that looked like a nursery becomes a quarantine line, and the colony chooses the future over the individual. That does not make the behavior simple. It makes it more unsettling, because the hive is not acting out of hatred. It is not punishing the young bee inside. It is removing risk from a place where risk can multiply in darkness. You thought the hive was only gentle cooperation. It is also hard prevention. Number 4. The workers that do this are not assassins in the human sense. This is important. It is tempting to call these bees killers. It is tempting to imagine a dramatic secret police inside the hive, hunting down weak young bees and destroying them for the good of the colony. That makes a powerful title. But the real behavior is stranger and more precise. The workers are not angry. They are not making moral choices. They are responding to signals, a smell, a cue, a pattern that says this cell is not like the others. Think of it less like murder and more like a gardener removing one diseased leaf before the whole plant is infected. If you have ever pinched off a tomato leaf with spots, or cut away a damaged stem, or pulled one sick seedling so the rest of the tray could survive, you already understand the shape of the decision. The plant did not become less valuable because you removed the damaged part. The whole system became safer. Inside the hive, that same logic can happen with wax, larvae, and worker bees moving in the dark. This is where the bee personalization boundary matters. The bees do not hate the cell. They do not decide in a human meeting that one young bee deserves to die. They respond to signals that evolution has made important. And when enough workers respond correctly, the colony becomes harder for disease and parasites to break. Number 5. The hidden war is fought before the enemy becomes visible. The most dangerous problems in a hive are often the ones that are easiest to miss. A predator at the entrance is obvious. A giant hornet is obvious. A bear tearing into a hive is obvious. Even a human standing too close to the entrance can become obvious. But a sick brood cell is not obvious. It is quiet. It is sealed. It sits among healthy cells looking almost the same. That is why this behavior matters. The colony is not waiting until disaster is visible. The colony is trying to detect danger early, before it becomes dramatic. This is one reason hygienic behavior has become so important in discussions about honeybee health. Some colonies are better at detecting and removing problem brood than others. Some respond quickly. Some respond slowly. Some miss cells that should have been opened. And that difference can matter. Not every hive has the same level of hygienic response. Not every colony is equally good at this hidden work. So when people talk about strong colonies, they are not only talking about how many bees you see at the entrance or how many flowers they visit in your garden. Strength can also mean what happens where you cannot see. A strong colony may be strong because workers inside it notice the wrong cell before the problem becomes large enough for you to notice anything at all. Have you ever watched bees around a hive entrance and wondered what was happening inside while everything outside looked normal? Tell me in the comments what you noticed. Was the hive loud, quiet, crowded, calm, or covered with bees moving in and out? Sometimes the outside gives only the smallest hint of what the inside is solving. Number 6. One removed cell can protect bees that have not even been born yet. This is the delayed payoff. The worker bee opening a bad cell is not only protecting the bees alive today, she is protecting future foragers, future nurses, future guards, future water carriers, future bees that may one day visit the flowers near your fence. That is why the act matters. A young bee removed from one cell may mean fewer parasites reproducing. It may mean fewer sick bees emerging. It may mean less pressure on the colony later. It may mean more healthy workers available when the first hot afternoon arrives, or when the clover opens, or when your lavender becomes worth visiting. The future bee on your flowers may depend on a decision made in a dark cell weeks earlier. That is the part most people never connect. You see the bee on the blossom. You do not see the inspection that may have helped her colony survive long enough to send her there. You see wings in sunlight. You do not see the wax opened in darkness. You see pollination. You do not see prevention. And yet both are part of the same colony story. Number 7. The hive is not perfect, but it is constantly correcting itself. This is where the myth breaks open. A bee colony is often described as perfect. Perfect hexagons, perfect teamwork, perfect instinct, perfect order. But a hive is not perfect. It is alive, and living things are messy. Cells fail, larvae die, parasites enter, moisture changes, heat rises, food runs short, workers make different choices. Some signals are missed, some problems are found too late. The genius of the hive is not that nothing goes wrong. The genius is that the colony has ways to respond when something does. That is a better way to see the bee on your flowers too. She is not a tiny piece of perfection. She is part of a system that is always adjusting. One day the colony sends foragers to lavender. Another day it sends water carriers to a damp stone. Inside, some workers feed brood, others clean, others fan. Others inspect cells that nobody outside will ever see. The hive survives not by being flawless, but by correcting small failures before they become collapse. The first time I really understood this, it changed how I looked at honeycomb. I stopped seeing it as a perfect pattern and started seeing it as a record of constant decisions. Every sealed cell was not just a shape, it was a question the colony had to keep asking. Is this cell healthy? Is this cell safe? Is this cell part of the future or part of the danger? Number 8. The bees that remove brood may be protecting your garden without ever seeing it. This is the strange connection. A nurse bee working deep inside the hive may never visit your flowers that day. She may not see the lavender by your path, the clover under the fence, or the tomato blossoms under the lower leaves. Her world may be dark wax, warm bodies, and the constant smell of the colony. But her work can still affect your garden. If she helps remove diseased brood, the colony may stay stronger. If the colony stays stronger, more foragers may reach the flowers later. If more healthy foragers survive, your garden may see more visits. The bee inside the hive does not know your garden, but her work may still shape what happens there. That is one of the most important ideas in this whole story. Backyard bee life is not only what happens on the flower. The bee you see outside is the visible edge of thousands of invisible jobs. Your garden gets the forager, but the forager only exists because other bees, hidden from you, kept the colony functioning. Some cleaned cells, some fed young, some guarded the entrance, some carried water, some inspected brood, and some opened a sealed cell that looked protected because what was inside had become a risk. Number 9. The final sign is a healthy bee that arrives as if nothing happened. This is the emotional part. The hidden war inside the hive does not end with a dramatic scene you can watch from your porch. There may be no visible battle, no loud warning, no obvious emergency, just a bee on your flowers. A normal bee. A bee that lands, works, lifts off, and disappears again. That may be the final sign that something went right. Not because nothing bad happened inside the hive, but because the colony found some of the bad things early enough to survive them. The bee on your flowers is not proof that the hive is perfect. She is proof that the hive is still functioning, still correcting, still making harsh little decisions in darkness so that ordinary work can continue in sunlight. And that is why this behavior matters. The next time you see a bee on your garden flowers, do not imagine only the flower visit. Imagine the hidden chain behind it, the sealed cells, the inspecting workers, the wax caps, the one cell that smelled wrong, the worker that stopped, the removal that looked brutal but may have protected thousands. The colony did not choose you, but your flowers may be part of what that colony is trying to reach tomorrow. And somewhere inside that hive, before the next bee ever touches your lavender, workers may already be deciding what must be removed so the colony can keep going. Most people think a hive survives because bees protect everything inside it, but sometimes a hive survives because bees know what they cannot afford to protect. If this changed how you see bee behavior, honeycomb, hygienic behavior, or the hidden work happening inside a hive near your garden, subscribe to the channel. There is much more happening behind the bees on your flowers than the sunlight ever shows you.